Yes.
Oh, come on.
Sure we do, Bonnie.
This is awesome. I love seeing all your faces.
So they can see you too, huh? Oh, okay.
Hello.
So many, Linda. So is that
So
normal?
you can flip back and forth between screens.
Alma.
Otherwise, you're just,
Okay.
it's just the way that
That's what I didn't
Zoom
know.
picks up.
In front of that, they will see you. But
I would encourage people to mute themselves unless they're.
I don't know how much we're shown when they show them all on big picture.
Know how to use the.
There I am.
Christy, could you do a volume check again?
Welcome. It's so good to see all of your smiling faces.
That's good.
We are going to allow for a few minutes for people to join. And if you want to go ahead and mute yourself, you can. I'm very thankful Daniel Petrie is actually running our Zoom, and he will mute and unmute you at different times during the meeting. Now they're all muted.
Everybody's muted. Except.
Should we raise our hand if we have a question?
There will be
Did
a
you hear
question
that?
answer time, and we will unmute. Yes. There will be a
Thank you.
question and answer time, and you will be unmuted at that time.
Thank you.
There's also a chat. You're welcome. There's a chat section that you can type a question into, and then Linda Spencer will call on you to talk about that question. Yeah, we highly encourage you to write your question in the chat first, and then we'll call on you with the question and answer section.
Oh, that's good. Good. That's right here. There's someone's already.
Danielle, can you give me an idea of the timer of when I should start?
I think we could probably get started. How many are on?
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and start. I want to start off by saying good evening, Congregational Board members. It's 8:05, and I would like to call the May 26th meeting of the Congregational Board of the First Christian Church to order. This meeting will be recorded. The secretary is taking notes and attendance with the meeting as well. The purpose of the meeting is to allow the Search and Call Committee to inform the Congregational Board of the recommendation of a candidate for the position of Associate Minister for First Christian Church. The only item on the agenda, as we only have one, I'm going to call upon Dave Meharry as the Chair of the Search and Call Committee to begin the presentation. So Dave?
Thank you. As you probably know, the search committee is made up of 7 members of the church, including. Can everyone hear me? Okay, we'll go again here. The search committee is made up of 7 members of the church, including Barb Foster, Daniel Petrie, Terry Siddons, Ray Cedars, Sarah Nicodemus, Linda Spencer, and myself. And Pastor Darla sat in on all of our meetings in an ex officio capacity. What I wanted to do right now was go over the process we used to come to the place we are this evening. We were given the job description of the associate minister, which was developed by the governing board back in last September of 2019. Soon after our initial committee meeting, we met with Rick Spleth, who's the regional minister for the Indiana region of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. He explained to us the recommended process, calling a minister, and gave each of us, of the committee members, a copy of the region's search committee guidelines and procedures, about 75 pages, as I remember. This included a form for the committee to complete, presenting a profile of First Christian Church and of the position we were searching for. Over a period of about 1 month, the committee completed this profile of First Christian. This included demographics of the congregation, such as the size of the congregation, the size in worship, the age distribution, the occupation, educational distributions. We included a description actually of the church building, the size of the sanctuary, the classrooms, a parking lot even. In addition, we included a description of the town, the size of Crawfordsville, the demographics, the diversity of the population, the industries, and the distance of the town from larger metropolitan areas. We described the relationship also that our church has with other churches in the community and community groups in Crawfordville and Montgomery County, and also our relationship with the region and other Christian Disciples of Christ churches. Finally, we described the skills and strengths we were looking for in an associate minister, and what responsibilities this person would be expected to carry here. We sent this profile to Rick Spleth in the regional office, and he sent us at that point, 9 different individual profiles of people who were in the search and call process, and he felt would be a good match for our church. We contacted all 9. Several had either just accepted all to other churches or wanted to locate in a different geographical region. We then interviewed 4 people using Zoom once or twice with each person. After the committee discussed these candidates, we decided to ask Reverend Kevin Toth to come to Crawfordville for a face-to-face interview for a couple of days. We did this just before the decision to stop all public meetings. It is based on these steps and meetings and committee discussions that the committee decided to bring Reverend Kevin Toth forward as the person we recommend to the Congregational Board for you to recommend to the congregation for this decision to call as an associate minister. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Daniel. He's right here.
Good evening. Hopefully you've all received the informational packet, either by letter or by email that Christy and Dave sent out. And in that, what I want to point out is Kevin's experience with the youth and small groups that really impressed everyone on our committee. His years of hard work with youth and camp staff at the Disciples of Christ summer camps, both as a counselor and then for several summers as camp director, indicate a real desire to work with youth, but also an ability to organize and fulfill the goals of the camp program. In meeting with him, he often talked about being a super organized person, but it's his ability to listen to the needs of the youth and adults he's working with and then modify his plan to best meet those needs that really is his greatest attribute in this area. He's worked with camps that have included adults with special needs, and that has given them the experience to find ways to include everybody wherever they're coming from or whatever needs they have that need to be met. He's also, to help those he's ministering to, has taken up the study of sign language to learn that. He has served 3 different disciples congregations in youth ministry, and in 2 of those, he also did mission work, he preached, and worked with outreach ministry. And then the next thing outside of just the youth is small groups, which is something we're really focused on for this associate minister role. And this is it's a passion for Kevin to work in a small group, to connect with each of the people in that group. The thing that was, you couldn't really put a finger on it, but in all of our interviews and meetings with him, it's his ability to connect with someone and just reach small groups, individuals with compassion, listen to who they are, what they need, and try to address that, not try to push his point through, but try to meet people where they are. And I think that's a huge asset for any small group environment. Additionally, we asked each candidate we interviewed, it was a big point of emphasis to find out what people's ability to resolve conflicts was. And Kevin, when asked this, indicated that he handles conflict by inviting all the parties involved together in a safe environment to sort through the issues. For him, this means setting the tone of the conversation as geared towards deep listening that requires setting aside one's assumptions first in order to try to hear the perspective of someone else. He seeks to set the tone of his environment by example and by leading with listening heart. Now I get to turn you back over to Dave.
Thank you. One of the areas of our job description highlighted was pastoral care. Kevin brings a good deal of experience being of help and support to people who find themselves in difficult or fearful situations, who are suffering or whose loved ones are suffering. His mother's death from cancer when he was only 18 has given him the personal experience of traumatic loss. He finds that this experience has been helpful in meeting the needs of others when they find themselves facing great loss or uncertainty. Because Kevin has devoted the past several years to full-time pastoral care as a chaplain in a medical situation, medical hospital, with diverse people of all ages, faith traditions, and has cultivated and backgrounds, he has a deep sense of the spiritual needs of all of God's children, and has cultivated a keen sense of listening and being present, even with complete strangers. His experience and training includes situations such as domestic violence, chemical dependency, suicide, death of a child. He has been called on to perform funeral services or other services of remembrance. Kevin is skilled in caring for folks who have experienced deep trauma and loss. These last several months of the pandemic, his role has shifted from directly working with the patients in the hospital to caring for the staff, the nurses and doctors who every day are facing these uncertain, life-threatening times. He is also called to care for the families of the patients. These family members are not able to be with their loved ones, and also need support and comfort, for which they turn to Kevin as he meets with them. In all these ways, we believe that Kevin brings a wealth of experience in the kind of pastoral care that working with Pastor Darla will be of great value to our congregation. Now I turn it over to Linda.
Good evening. So it fell on me to talk about his preaching and his professionalism. But before I get into that, I really kind of want to say a little bit more about his personality. And I draw on not only our own conversations with Kevin, but also upon the references. And I have to say that I was one of the people on the committee lucky enough to contact references for all the candidates. And there was a genuine love and joy when talking about Kevin when I spoke to one of the references that was listed for him. A phrase that keeps coming up to describe Kevin is that he is a young man, but an old soul. One of the reasons why I think he has this characteristic about him is that he is on the autistic spectrum. And this gives him a perspective on life and an ability to absorb details around him that really informs relationships and his ability to meet the needs of those around him. He is quiet, not because he has nothing to say, but because he is simply soaking in the information all around him by just simply observing what is going on around him. If asked a question, he may not answer right away. And it's not because he doesn't know what to say, it's because he wants to give the question the full weight of what is behind it and to think out the deepest, most authentic answer that he can give to somebody. He's a very, very deeply thoughtful person. And his preaching reflects this. His preaching is deeply thoughtful. It's vulnerable, authentic, and very mature. Biblically grounded, theologically very, very sound. He has truly deep critical thinking about really tough theological questions. He draws on life and the teachings of Jesus, and yet he embeds real life experiences as he draws us into the story. I hope you've had a chance to listen to some of his sermons. He encourages the listener to enter into a conversation with and make their own faith-based decisions. Also, he does not like to preach political sermons, but instead he preaches the values and the teachings of Jesus Christ. He's a young man with an old soul. His conduct reflects this. He is thoughtful and kind during emotionally challenging situations of any sort. Again, another comment from his references. He is thoroughly professional. He adapts to the needs of those whom he leads, rather than deciding on a course of action and then leading others towards that goal. He understands that his voice carries authority. He is discerning. He is deeply mature. He exudes a love for all, and then just really truly values all perspectives. He truly embodies the belief in the priesthood of all believers and believes that all of us, no matter who we are or where we come from, we are all children of God. He is attentive to and remembers details. The reference I spoke to had a specific example about her son going off to camp and having a specific worry, and how thoughtful Kevin was in following up to make sure he was doing okay. Even after we did our Zoom review, he remembered I was leaving for vacation the next day, and he sent me an email to say, I hope you have safe travels. Again, it's just that thoughtfulness to follow through on that kernel of understanding that he had. He self-identifies as being super organized. And again, I think it's largely that attention to detail and that need to plan things out and then to follow through on what has been planned. And he can be depended on to follow through on any of his responsibilities. Most importantly, the reference I spoke to and others who commented on Kevin, who know him, have stated enthusiastically that they would want Kevin to be their minister. In short, he has overcome big hurdles in his life and is moving forward in a positive, grace-filled trajectory. Again, that's another quote from the person I spoke to, and I think it really captures the kind of young person that this young minister is. I'm going to turn it over now to Darla, who will give her perspective.
Thanks everybody for coming and showing up on Zoom. You may hear a little bit of repetitive stuff, but I wanted to lift up what was really important to me in a partner, and having a partner in ministry, and thinking about that partner's care of the congregation as in the community. And I think of Kevin as this golden opportunity for the church. He's this young man who is so mature and deeply grounded. And the thing that I asked myself when we began this whole search was, and matters most to me, does this person love the church? Does this person, can they love the people out of their faith? And that was the number one thing about Kevin, was his passion for the church, his rootedness in the disciples of Christ. And that's important to me. I want to have a partner who really cares about the church. And what that means to me is, if someone really cares about the church and they care about people, they're going to be committed to being present with people, especially in their most difficult times, of which he's devoted several years to that in his chaplaincy, and has demonstrated that time and time again. I love that he has a passion for learning. He's an avid reader, and he loves theology, and he loves to study scripture, and loves to teach. and to have a partner who also enjoys learning, and to have that, be able to have someone to dialogue with that really likes that process. We talked about, you know, opportunities at Wabash College to be able to continue to do education, as well as the Indiana region and other ways, and that was very exciting to him. Conflict is something that always comes up in human relationships and churches, and how we do that is so important. And I really wanted a partner who knows how to help resolve, and we've not had any big conflicts since I've been here, but knows how to resolve just issues, even between two people who are struggling up with something, or something comes up in a board or elders, or, you know, that he is comfortable dealing with conflict, of which he is. He knows how to do that. He knows how to work through and mediate those kinds of things. I feel like, which is really refreshing, he has a very, in my mind, a really healthy self-awareness. He knows what his strengths are. He knows what his challenges are, and he's very open about that. And I crave that in a partner, where we can be authentic with each other in ministry and help each other grow as people and as ministers in the church. Of course, his vulnerability, a number of people talked about that, just being willing to be present and open and available, and being willing to share his own story with folks. And of course, the most important thing is someone who is trustworthy, who is authentic, who I know the congregation, if I go on vacation, they know that they can count on him. When he says something, that he's gonna follow through, and that's just the core of who he is as a person. As far as his preaching and teaching and filling in, one of the first things that he said when we asked him about preaching and what's your philosophy of preaching and everything, when he said, you know, I don't like to preach a political sermon because it divides people. And from my standpoint as a pastor, that is hard to find. I don't care what a pastor's political or sociological perspective is, it is hard not to preach politics in a sermon. It's hard to find pastors who will stay out of that and preach Jesus values and good news, and hopefully give people the integrity to do that for themselves out of the values that we, you know, that we explore together in preaching and teaching and whatnot. And when he said that, I'm like, oh, I won't have to worry about that. And it's not that I haven't stepped in that realm before mistakenly, and pastors do sometimes, but that we preach values. And so that was really important to me. He'll be great in small groups, as folks said. I think the biggest question for me is, will he care for the people? That's what I worry about when I go away. It's not that he wouldn't be able to do a worship or a funeral. Will he care for the people? That's the thing I worry about. Will he be attentive to the needs and be comfortable planning and leading worship? And it's a resounding yes on that. And then to top that off, his organization skills. We both talked about, I need to have things organized because I can be very forgetful. So when I heard that he was very organized, that's exactly what I need in a partner. I have to plan things out, like my worships 6 to 8 weeks, even 10 weeks out. I plan my preaching and everything because I need that to stay focused, and that's really important to him. But the most important thing is we just really connected. I felt like we finished each other's sentences. We were excited to be in each other's company. We were excited to talk about the vision and the future of the church. I felt like we shared that. We both feel passionate about growing people's faith and equipping people in learning and growing in their faith. We're excited about the future, even in this uncertain time, the creative possibilities that could happen. we both have a challenge with sometimes doing more than we should. We talked about that. Sometimes we do too many hours and then we get worn out. We both have that. And we agreed that we would meet once a week and check in with each other on personal care, and check in on worship and long range and short range goals. That would be a weekly pattern for us. It was important. And most importantly, and this is the most important thing to me, is that pastoral care, connection, and relationship is built and upheld in the church by both of us. He's mature, and I'm just very excited about this candidate. And I think that's about it. I think at this point we open it up for questions about anything that you have and about the process, or Kevin, or anything else. All right, y'all can have one to step up.
Okay, so I've been nominated to try and moderate the question answer, and rather than flipping through screens looking for hands raised, I'm going to ask you to type your question into the chat box. We'll see how that works, and then Daniel is sort of doing the administrative stuff, and he can feed me questions, I guess.
Rick Stout has asked for the rationale for requiring a signature on the ballot.
The rationale for requiring the signature on the ballot. Christy, would you like to speak to that?
There was quite a discussion about whether or not to have that. And I was told in past history of the church, the congregational vote was usually taken in person, and it was either done vocally or by raising of hands with that, in that process. So it was decided, even though we could not meet in person, that we would continue by at least having the member sign the ballot and validate that. There was some confusion because the congregation, if a candidate is taken to the congregation, then in the past it changes, where we did not have each person of the congregation sign. That was simply a checked yes or no. But because it is the Congregational Board voting with exact members, we were asking for a vote by signing the ballot.
As a member of the committee, I just want to add as well that in the unlikely event that the Congregational Board does not want to forward his candidacy, as a committee, it's important to us to be able to find out what the underlying concerns are, not only so that that can inform our next steps, but also because it is a professional courtesy to go back to the candidate and explain what the concerns were. And so without an in-person meeting in which we could actually hear directly from people, this was the best way that we could come up with to be able to know who we should be reaching out to hear more about what the specific concerns are. Okay.
All right,
Next question.
Brad Weaver says, Radio Talk. Brad Weaver says, I'm glad to hear how excited everyone on the search committee is about Kevin. The job summary lists 5 primary areas of responsibility. Which of these 5 would you say Kevin has the most room to grow?
Great question. Brad Weaver has asked, of the 5 major areas of responsibility, in which areas does he have the most room to grow? We have other members of the committee also on Zoom. If anybody has a strong inclination to jump in, feel free. Dave or Daniel, do you have any? I'm not sure he had. I don't even recall that. I know we spent a lot of time looking at them specifically. What's that? Dave has got it. Oh, okay, great. Honestly, well, so I know we're both looking at this in order to answer because it's a great question. I would say probably preaching and worship. Well, that would be my feeling, only because he has not been a minister in a congregational previously. He has led worship. He has given sermons.
He was an intern.
He was an intern, but he's not actually had a paid position at, well, that's not even true. You're probably best at answering this, but that has not been his congregational ministry, has not been his focus for the past 2 years. Chaplaincy has been. He has been an intern in a congregation. He has been a volunteer in congregations, but he has not preached on a, every Sunday basis yet.
Yeah, I would say one of the difference, when you hear his preaching, it's very, very good, very solid. And he's called back by the pastor of the originally Christian church when the regular pastor is going to be out of town to preach. But that means it's just every 3 or 4 months. So he's not developing a series the way, say, Darla does, of having 5 or 6 weeks in a row of a growing topic. And that's something he'd have to, for example, when Darla goes on vacation and Kevin would need to preach 4 times in a row, he's going to have to figure out how to choose a topic which will flow through for 4 weeks. And that, I don't think he's had that experience.
I'm almost afraid to ask, but next question.
We have no other typed questions.
Okay.
People on the phone have questions that they
I don't know how to get those questions.
Other people?
He could put
Are-
it on app so we can hear people talk.
You want to? Okay, we're trying to figure out how to allow people that have phoned in to be able to ask their questions since they can't necessarily type them in.
It's no, I don't know.
Sorry for the technological concern, but we want to make sure that everybody's concerns and questions have had a chance to be raised and answered. And while we're trying to sort this out, I would say also that any of the 7 of us in the committee would welcome any calls with concerns that you may think about after the meeting is concluded. We would be happy to talk with any of you if you have a concern that you don't want to raise at this time or that you don't think of at this time.
So he has not been an associate pastor, right? Linda?
No, he's not. He was ordained 2 years ago, and he has served in a chaplaincy residency and a medical center for the past 2 years. So this would be his first associate minister position.
And he's from the
Oh, sure. I'm going to
the
let
Dallas-Fort Worth area.
He was in the, yeah, yes.
Well, he's living there now.
Oh yeah, he's in Dallas-Fort Worth now. Go ahead.
He actually grew up for his first 12 years in central Pennsylvania and then moved to North Carolina, where his mother had a job teaching. And so he grew up the rest of his young adulthood in North Carolina, went to Barton College in North Carolina, graduating with a degree in history and religion, and then went to Bright Seminary, which is a Texas Christian in Texas. And that's how he got down there to Texas. And now is had 2 years of chaplaincy at a medical center in Dallas, Texas.
Just to comment on every pastoral
Everyone
internship
received-
is different. But I'm sorry, what was the question? Anyway, so can you all hear me okay?
Did everyone receive the
So a thumbs up?
Everyone receive what?
Receive what?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I don't know.
Can you type the question?
Their information,
It's not coming through.
I don't see any place to type it.
Oh, yes, did everybody, Yeah, if you would type it, that would be, oh, did everyone receive the information on Kevin in the mail? Is that right, Barb? Can you do a thumbs up
Yes,
if you received the
right.
information? All right. And if anyone didn't
everybody
receive the
receive-
information, please let us know. All right. Just a note, pastoral internships.
Make
are
sure everybody
different.
read
We
their-
do know Kevin did preach on and off regularly. Oh, it's not.
What happened?
I don't know.
I just did Barb, just throwing out questions.
Okay, I'm going to start over. Can you hear me okay? Pastoral internships are different from church to church. I do know in Kevin's, he did preach on and off. It was involved in the high school and middle school youth programming, and part of that was going to camp, but also teaching and working with the youth. He's very comfortable with preaching, and he's done funerals. That's part of being a chaplain, is doing funerals. Sometimes you do little worship services, even in people's, not worship, but many, communion services with families. If somebody is going to lose someone, I only know that from being a chaplain. So he's had experience, and but not to the degree of a full-blown associate, if that's helpful. All right. Yeah.
What's that? Okay, any other questions?
There is a question.
There is a question?
Okay.
Okay.
You got 3 more in the intro.
Oh, my goodness.
During the interview process, did Kevin discuss what he sees as challenges in relation to the position?
I could answer.
I'm going to let Darla answer that question.
The only thing I heard him say was that he, he can tend to overwork. And so learning to, because he wants everything to go well, that he is going to learn to have to temper his work schedule a little bit. I don't remember him expressing a sense of feeling like anything would be challenging, other than just, every pastor needs to grow. We continue to grow our whole time. And I think he's excited about continuing to grow in his preaching and teaching with all ages and whatnot. Anybody else?
Yes. The Young Square has asked, does Reverend Todd feel strongly about working with the congregation to help them discover their gifts and enable them to use them in the building up of the church? Many of us older leaders see a time when many of us will need replacing.
Who would like to answer that question? We did talk at length about that, and I'm just wondering who would be best to answer that question. Dave, you want to take that one? Okay.
Yeah, I guess I think one of the strengths that he comes back to a lot of times is his ability to work with people to help them develop their ideas. I really like the idea that he comes in with a plan, but then lets it move to where the people need to and want to have it go. So I think that would be a strength, would be helping people figure out what their strengths are and what the church's needs are, and then melding those together in a way that moves our church forward. If I could do it, and if you've had a chance to listen to the interview that he did with Linda and Daniel and Sarah, I'd say he wants to work with y'all all the time. He is from North Carolina, but I really felt that was one of the strengths of his personality, was to come together with people and help them mold their ideas and their solidify their plans so that it satisfies what they're wanting to do, but also solves the issues that are facing the larger church. That to me was one of his strengths.
And I would just add also that one of the questions we'd asked him was something along the lines of, what would be your immediate plans if you were to come to the church? And his answer was, I would spend 6 months listening and basically getting to know the members of the church, helping to identify what their gifts are, and learning what, you know, what our church family is, rather than coming in with an agenda that he intends to follow through on. He would get to know everybody, and as part of that, learn what their different gifts are, and yes, to help build up the church and to help to develop leaders within the younger members of the church. I hope that answers the question. Next question. Okay.
Ray made a similar report to the board. Ray made a similar report to the board about the search committee choice for Darla. Ray said that the committee simply knew that Darla was their choice. When did your search committee simply realize that Kevin was the right person?
I think we would all have a different answer. Ray has raised his hand. Ray would like to say something. Can we get him unmuted? Okay.
Can you all
Okay,
hear me okay? Am I coming
Yes.
through? Okay, good. Yeah, part of our job in the search committee is to listen and watch for the Spirit working inside us. And we were charged by Rick Spleth that we would know when we had the right person, because you would get this excitement and you would feel drawn in. And I think each one of us would say the same thing. We interviewed several people, and when you talk to Kevin, Pastor Toth, you immediately are talking to somebody who wants to talk to you. You're immediately talking to somebody who wants to listen. You're immediately talking to somebody that wants to hear your story and then see what part he can play in it. And you know, when you talk to some people, they're very mellow tone, they're very almost disengaged. When you talk to Kevin, he doesn't sit back, he leans in. He has an infectious smile, and he's paying attention the whole time. And you get drawn in. And we kind of knew, without saying anything to each other, this is somebody of quality, and this is somebody that sounds like they fit the bill. It was our duty to continue to examine other folks, the same process. All the candidates that we were given, we didn't make a selection until we talked to everyone, until we interviewed them as many times as possible, until we checked all their references. And in doing that, we came back to the same place all the time. This is the person that we felt was being called to our church.
Dave, did you want to add to that?
I'm just going to add, if you haven't seen, I come back to the interview that they did with him, you actually see him kind of leaning in and then listening and leaning in. But I found that in the day and a half that he spent with us here in Crawfordsville, where we had a chance to be one-on-one, it really was a matter of feeling like he was there with me, and we were talking, we were asking questions of each other, we were thinking carefully of what we wanted to be about, and I just felt like I'd known him quite a while actually before that one day was over. There's another question coming up.
There is.
Okay.
Barb wanted to make sure.
Which is a member.
Yeah. Barb was a member of our committee, wanted to make sure that this was in the literature that was sent out, that everyone knows that Kevin is a single gay man.
Right. And Kevin, even early in the conversation, or not real early in the conversation, but brought up that he wanted to make sure that we knew that, and wanted to make sure that would not make a difference. For him, he is not a gay pastor. He is a pastor who happens to be gay. And he really, in fact, I think in some ways that helps him with his reach into people who are different, understand what it's like to be on the edge. In the same way that he can work with adults at his summer camp that he worked with who were differently able. He would understand how it felt to be sidelined. And so, yeah, that's an issue that was out in front that we were aware of. But it's not a defining characteristic we felt for him.
Yeah, and I'd like to expand on that just a little bit, because when we first got the candidate profiles that Rick Spleth forwarded to us, we looked at their social media presence. That was part of our due diligence. And so as part of that, we happened to find out that he is gay. Going back to the job description, nowhere does it say that it needs to be a heterosexual person. Going back to the Regional Assembly resolution of 2013, in which it was stated that sexuality, gender, race, ethnicity, all are invited. We are all God's children. Jesus said nothing about homosexuality. Now, I personally come from a Methodist minister background and was raised in a family in which it was taught that it was a sin. And it really wasn't until, and so I understand the concerns. It really wasn't until I was an adult and in medical school that I started to question this. And then during leading different Bible study groups, came to really examine where this comes from. And again, you can use scripture to say that women should be submissive. You can use scripture to say that slavery should be acceptable. There's all different ways that you can use scripture out of context in order to marginalize groups that you don't particularly like. But that's not who we are. We are inclusive. We embody the concept that we are all children of God. And so we decided, even before we first talked with him, that it didn't matter and that we wanted to find out more about him. And it really wasn't until we had 2 different Zoom interviews with him and an in-person interview that we simply came to love Kevin for who he is. He is an extraordinary human being. He has overcome incredible hurdles in his life. He grew up autistic. He grew up gay. His mom died of cancer at the age of 18. And yet, despite all of that, he is a loving, kind, perceptive, empathetic, enthusiastic embodiment of the life and teachings of Christ. And so I do understand the concern very much. Darla has volunteered to have another conversation tomorrow if people want to explore that even further. But as a church that is a Christian church, disciples of Christ, sexuality does not make a difference any more than ethnicity or color of their skin. So that's the perspective that the committee took. So, any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. From the being on the search committee, it seems Barb may have some hesitations. Can we hear why this?
Barb, would you like to speak up? Let's get you unmuted so you can voice those.
I am. Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. Mm-hmm. Everybody?
Yes.
All right. I was under, the opinion that we were to get someone that was experienced, that Darla wouldn't have to train, that could step in and take the overload. That was the purpose for getting an associate minister, and that could take the overload right away when she needed it and step in, replace her. And that a small town as Crawfordsville, or small whatever, that a lot different than the Dallas-Fort Worth area living, and that he's had no experience as a pastor, as a associate pastor, but he's been at 27 years old, and he's been in the hospital chaplains. And I just felt like, wanted to make sure everybody had read their material that they got and see that, yeah, he'll be working with the youth and the young marrieds. And so it just has to be a personal opinion.
So Daniel, you want to step in as a young person with a family? And then maybe Darla can speak in as well, since, having somebody to help her is important as well.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, as I guess though in some of these groups I've been deemed middle-aged, which is hurtful. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm part of the younger contingent in the congregation. I have 2 kids that come to church and yell when they're not supposed to, and sometimes when they're supposed to. I've thought about this quite a bit. I mean, out of the 5 candidates we interviewed, there's no one I would rather have helping to mold them and guide them than Kevin. And maybe this came across in the YouTube interview, there's just this connection level where you can tell he cares about each person he's talking to. And he's got ample experience with youth through the youth camps he worked at, the youth groups in the churches he's worked in. And I guess to address the timeline issue of his age and what he's done, the general timeline there would be you finish your bachelor's degree at 22, which is, I believe, what he did. Then you go into a master's program, which you have to get before being ordained. And since being ordained, he spent 2 years in chaplaincy, where he's really been able to use those skills to connect with any number of people. He meets, and within 30 seconds is discussing with them the most darkest and tragic times of their lives. And I think it's a skill set he can certainly bring to this church. So experience-wise, we talked to some other people, and everybody on the committee had different views of what strengths and weaknesses they had. I mean, we had some people who were coming back to the ministry after a few years off, and I just sensed a disconnect there, that their heart wasn't truly in it. Whereas Kevin, as you've heard from everybody here, the biggest thing, he has the basic skill set in being an ordained minister. He knows how to run a church, and he cares. He actively listens more than almost anyone I've ever met. I'm the type of person who listens to respond. He listens to consider what you're saying and take that in. So I know we're just kind of beating a dead horse with the young person, old soul, but that really serves this congregation, that he can connect with the youth. I know Sarah and Carrie both on the committee, and we're absolutely giddy, and I'm sure Sarah's probably frantically clicking unmute to pipe in. But there's a lot of energy coming from the younger contingent on this committee about Kevin and what he can bring to this church. And if Sarah's on there and wants to say something, or
Daniel, you were pretty spot on. I was ready to click when you were wrapping up there. I will say that I actually took Andrews to meet Kevin when I had the evening with him, because I wanted to see how he interacted with kids. And I think kids are a great indicator of a person. Those of you that work with young kids probably know what I'm talking about. You may even, your own kids have shied away from someone. By the end of the hour and a half Anders was with Kevin, Anders ran up and gave him a hug goodbye without being prompted. So I just want that to be shared, that I took Anders because I wanted to see how he would interact, because Kevin admitted that he didn't have much interaction with ages 3 and under. And I thought, well, what better way to figure out if he's willing to work with that age group? And I also wanted to share, I didn't get unmuted early enough, but when I knew Kevin was the person, was during a second interview, and he was kind of asking about Crawfordsville and things like that. And after we finished Zooming with him, I said, I could see sitting down at Joshua Cup, having a cup of coffee and a conversation with Kevin. And that's when I knew, because like Daniel mentioned, he listened, and we did get the chance to have a conversation when he visited Joshua Cup, actually, and he listened. And He shared about his childhood. We had a lot in common about how he grew up. We talked about riding bikes and things like that. And so he connected with us, but then he also, I felt like I was talking to a mentor at the same time, which I think is huge for the group of young families that we have in the church, that he can connect with us because we all have lived through similar experiences. But I also like the fact that I feel comfortable going to him for advice and for guidance.
So I don't know if you all are wanting me to take a whole lot of vacation. I'm getting that. But I may be gone 4 Sundays a year. So I don't plan on, doing anything. Maybe I might go on a conference or something that puts me out for a Sunday. I think in my 3.5 years here, I don't know that I think I've missed 2 Sundays in a row. I'm maybe twice in 3.5 years. Yeah, because I was sick. Anyway, so I'm not looking for this huge replacement necessarily, but yes, I need someone who can run worship and lead worship. And I've heard folks, and we've talked about this on the search team, I didn't have a preconceived idea that I needed an older person. I needed I wanted a partner that had a strong work ethic, that has a passion for the church, that's smart, that's good in their theological grounding and biblical grounding, that I wouldn't have to worry about that. That is professional, mature. And I know Kevin's 27, but he knows how to be with people in a mature way. And so I don't feel concerned about that. He will learn some on the job, but you could have a pastor with 20 years of experience that would bring more than Kevin on that end of knowing all the inner workings of a church. But every church functions quite different. Their boards and the tone of the elders and the roles of elders and deacons is different in all the different churches that I've served in. They have some general things about them, but I had to learn the system here when I got here. And it didn't matter how much experience I had to learn from being in the meetings, talking to people, listening to people, to sort through, how does this church do business together? How do they make decisions together? And that's a little bit different. There will be a growing edge no matter who comes as an associate minister. I don't imagine myself in a position of feeling like I have to train Kevin. He's got a 3-year master's degree, Master's of Divinity degree, and worked 2 full-time years as a chaplain in very difficult circumstances. I will be a guide, but he will also be a colleague. And yes, I will be the senior minister who will give guidance to him, but so will you. It's not just me. It would be congregational guidance, and that's anybody that comes in. And just my thoughts.
We also, as a committee, talked about the responsibility that we have as a church to help mentor young ministers. Somebody has to mentor them. The fact that Darla and Kevin clicked on such a deep level means that she's just going to be a great mentor for any young person. But we're not talking about somebody who is newly ordained. We're talking about somebody who's been ordained for 2 years, who's done funerals and has done weddings and has done incredibly deep, challenging work as a hospital chaplaincy during a global pandemic. So we're not talking about some person who's just graduated from the seminary. We're talking about somebody who already comes in with a breadth and depth of experience, who now is excited to be mentoring with somebody like Darla to learn more about congregational ministry. And I think First Christian Church does have a responsibility to Christian Church Disciples of Christ as a denomination to help serve that function. All right, next question.
And echo that sentiment about giving people their start. I think Bonnie Yun may have made a comment about where the congregation did give him his wings. And when I think about calling someone who may be 27, one, age is always just a number. And I think back to how many of us, someone took a chance on us when we were 21, 22, and gave us an opportunity to get where we are today. And there are some great things, awesome things happening with the members of First Christian Church. And they all stem from where you got your start. So those people that gave you your start are now, through you, changing the lives of others. And so I think that's a great comment that Bonnie shared there as well.
Thank you.
From Merlin, did he indicate what his 3 to 5 year or long-term goal was? Also, what is the long-term goal of the church for him?
That's a good question. I would like to take that because we did talk about that to some degree. Darla, you probably are in the best position to talk about that.
Well, he and I met together, and we definitely talked about wanting to grow the spiritual depth of the members of the church, where we create a lot more opportunities for people in small groups to explore their faith, to have Bible study. I would like to, one of the reasons I really had hoped for an associate to come is someone where we can do teaching. He can teach a series over here, and I can teach a series over there. And so we can cover larger amounts of the congregation in teaching. So the long-term goal was to deepen the spiritual faith of the congregation. And also, you know, my passion is to be connected with the community. So we had a long conversation about that, about being engaged in the community and finding ways, continuing to do that, for the congregation to be engaged as we are now in our community. And that's the long-term goals that we talked about in an overarching way. Now we have a pandemic. Those goals haven't changed, but the way we're going to do them is going to have to be different in some ways for a while. So we will have to explore that together with leadership. What does that look like to do small groups in the next year? What does it look like to be engaged in the community when, you know, we don't know what that's going to look like in the next 6 months? So it's a working on your feet kind of ministry right now. Thankfully, chaplaincy is one of those things where you are always having to respond to people you've never met. You don't know the situation until you look at the chart, or a doctor or a nurse tells you what's going on, and you always are having to adapt to what's right in front of you. And I feel like Kevin will have that ability to be nimble and yet grounded, centered in our faith. So that's my thoughts on that. Linda, anything?
Darla, I think you mentioned at one point the average lifespan for an associate minister.
Oh, 2 years.
2 years. So we don't know personally what his long-term goals are, if that was the intent of your question. I would just also want to point out that he has another job offer he had another job offer. It's probably been withdrawn at this point, but before we extended our call to him, he had received a job offer for another chaplaincy position in Wisconsin.
It was at a church.
Oh, at a church.
It was a church.
Oh, okay. Oh, it was.
It was a congregation.
But he was so excited about the opportunity to come and work with us that he came back to us to just say, before I take this other job, I'd like to know where you are. And that, I think, reflects how he feels about this opportunity. That he was willing to put them on hold while we tried to sort out where we were as a committee before he said yes or no to the other position. I just thought I'd mention that. Next question.
Next. From Rex Henry. Why is Kevin, particularly a gay person, interested in coming to a small conservative community instead of a large city?
Why is Kevin, as a gay person, interested in coming to a relatively small city? I may not be the best person, but my intuition is that he really doesn't see himself as a gay minister. He sees himself as a minister. And he sees the opportunity here at First Christian as being very much in sync with what he feels is his calling as a minister. The fact that he's gay is not first and foremost about any more so than somebody's heterosexuality is going to be first and foremost. He is a minister. He's a minister of great passion, great deep theological grounding and belief. His sexuality is immaterial as far as the position is concerned. That would be my thought. Anybody else have an input?
Linda, can I add something to that?
Please, yeah.
Please. One of the things that, another way to answer that particular question, why was he interested in coming here versus going to a large community or any place else for that matter? And for me, the big answer to that question is you all. He had said several times, after reading our church's profile and after our interviews with him and discussing who we are as a church, the things that we're involved in, the different things that you all do in our community, clubs and free clinics and building houses and habitat and the Meals on Wheels, and you all know all that stuff. That made the hair stand up on the back of his neck and get excited. We're a congregation who's moving and trying to do things. Our Child Development Center that's coming on, a very exciting thing for our church. And he could get that intensity out of each one of us because we were excited about what our church is doing right now, and that we have some direction. And he'd like to help us and be a part of that.
In addition to that, I think part of that question saying he's a young gay guy, why wouldn't he want to stay in a larger city where there's a larger single gay population? He's really given no indication. He's a gay guy, but he's not seeking out any sort of crazy party lifestyle that some may associate there. He's not looking for anything like that a big city could provide. What he has told us is he's from a smaller community, raised in smaller towns. He really doesn't seem to like the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex at all. It's just kind of where he went to school, where he found a job. But when he came to Crawfordsville, his comments were that he just loved being in the small community. He's talked about how he likes getting outdoors, getting into nature. I think this is what he's seeking ultimately, is a smaller community like Crawfordsville. And I mean, as far as a conservative angle, he's been in Texas for several years. I don't think that's anything that really concerns him in any way, shape, or form, the political leanings of the community. Because I mean, this congregation has a wide variety of political views. I think he felt comfortable here. He felt comfortable in this community, in this church, and that's really what he's seeking out ultimately, not one of 6,000 churches in a city of 5 million.
Okay, next question. This social distancing moderation is a real challenge.
We failed.
Do it, that's
So Dave Champa wants to know where to find the Zoom interviews and YouTube info. I don't know if you didn't get the email.
That information about the links to the sermons and the Zoom interview went out in, I want to say, in an email as well as in the mailings. Dave, if you didn't get that information, we're going to, thank you. We're anybody who wants to stay on after the meeting has come to a conclusion, we're going to go ahead and show the interview for those that just want to stay on and watch it. And then in terms of the links to the sermons that he has uploaded to the interwebs, those links have been shared. We can share them again. Okay. Next question. Do we have more questions?
I'm asking any other questions.
Okay, very good. Christy.
All right. Well, first of all, I would like to thank every member of our Search and Call committee for the number of hours that they've spent and the heartfelt recommendation that they brought to us tonight. And so at this time, would someone like to make a motion?
Adjourn. I move. Andrew Nicodemus.
So we have a motion from Andrew Nicodemus to accept the recommendation of the candidate, Reverend Kevin Toth, for the position of the Associate Minister for First Christian Church. Do I have a second?
Second.
And
Chuck Ransbach.
seconded by Chuck Ransbach. I need to remind you at this time that we will be voting by a mail-in ballot. As a member of the Congregational Board of the First Christian Church, please prayerfully consider and affirm the process and recommendation of the Search and Call Committee to call Reverend Kevin Toth to the position of the Associate Minister for First Christian Church. Please mark your ballots, place the ballot in the pre-stamped envelope, and submit it by mailing the ballot to our church office. You may also submit the ballot by bringing the ballot in the envelope to the church and dropping it in our secure Walnut Street mailbox. The envelope containing the mail-in ballot must be postmarked by May 30th. Votes will be counted by Governing Board Chair, Search and Call Committee Chair, and the Secretary, and an announcement of the vote will be made at that time. As stated in the First Christian Church Constitution, the Congregational Board shall consider the recommendation of the Search and Call Committee, and if approved by a 3/4 majority of those present and voting, shall recommend the prospective minister to the congregation. I encourage you to contact any of the following people if you have any questions or further concerns that you would like to discuss. You may contact me, Christy Reese, Dave Meharry, Linda Spencer, Raymond Williams, or Pastor Darla. Pastor Darla, will you now lead us in prayer?
Yes. Let's pray. Oh, loving God, we give you thanks that you promise your presence to be with us. You promise to be with us when we call on you. As your church, we ask that your Holy Spirit would move among us, that you would guide us and direct us in this decision, that you would bring our faith in trusting the outcome and being faithful as we move forward with that outcome. Most of all, oh God, we give you thanks for your Spirit that holds us together in all our diversity, sends us out, and loves us into our faith and loves us into community. God, as we depart this meeting, we pray that you go with us, that you guide us and direct us. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
With no further items on our agenda, it is now 9:15 p.m. and the Congregational Board meeting stands adjourned. If you have not had the opportunity to see the Zoom interview with Kevin Toth, I encourage you to stay on this Zoom and view that interview. Thank you for attending the Congregational Board meeting this evening. And I also want to just add, thank you so much for bearing with us with this Zoom meeting in these times of not being able to be in person. It is something we are trying very hard to make sure we have covered, and we are thankful you were here.
On behalf of the search committee, it is my honor to introduce Reverend Kevin Anthony Toth as our candidate for the position of Associate Minister for our church. Kevin is a graduate of Barton College, majoring in religious studies and history. He then earned his master's in divinity with a certificate in pastoral care from Bright Divinity School at Texas Christian University, graduating in May 2018. He was ordained as a minister at the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, North Carolina region on June 23rd, 2018. Since then, he's been working in a clinical pastoral education program at Methodist Health Systems in Dallas, which he completes this August. So, Kevin, can you tell us more about the chaplaincy you've been doing for the past couple of years?
Yeah. So part of my main role as one of the chaplain residents is to provide spiritual care to a diverse population that comes through our hospital. So meaning people who are Christian, but also people who are Buddhist or Jewish or Muslim. Just the other day, I provided a Quran to a Muslim patient, and that's part of my role, is to be an advocate for patients, but also to be a witness to a patient. So what I mean by witness is that, oftentimes spiritual hurt comes from a place of not being able to be heard, not having their emotions be heard. And so what I'm there for is to hear them. I'm there to listen. I'm here to hear their story. Where is God speaking to them in those difficult moments where they're suffering from illness or even death? And I'm there when they're in the ER and families are worried, and I'm sitting beside families, making sure that their needs are taken care of. And I'm there, hearing their concerns and making sure that their concerns are heard by the medical staff. So that's a lot of what I'm currently doing in the hospital. I'm learning what it means to provide spiritual care in moments of crisis and also in moments of uncertainty. And